So, first things first, guys. How are you?
How are we? Great.
We're good, yeah, doing well. Yeah, we're a little bit jet lagged, but good.
Okay.
Just kind of finding our feet. We arrived in London 2 nights ago.
Yep.
And we've kind of had a busy little schedule so far. We went straight to a studio in Bath and did a recording there at the distillery studio, which was a lot of fun, and then drove over to Amsterdam last night, and we've got some other little performances today, and then our first gig of the tour tomorrow night.
Okay. So, is this an anxious time then? A little bit hectic, and now the first gearing up for the first gig?
Anxious. Maybe there's a little bit, just because we're, trying to find our feet, as Tim says, and decide what songs we're playing, and we're going to do some rehearsing tomorrow, and
it's kind of like lots of different things.
Yeah.
It's like times of really relaxed, like being in the tour van can be awesome. Like 6 hours in a tour van, just chatting and
playing 20 questions,
listening to music and stuff is super relaxing, and then then some rehearsing, which is fun, and then like things like this, which is also interesting.
Okay.
And then gigs.
Sounds like a good day.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the music, I'd like to go back a little bit, because I believe you met in Southeast Asia. Do you recall that very first meeting?
Yes.
I recall the very first meeting. Yeah, do you recall the very first meeting?
McDonald's.
It was in a McDonald's.
Okay.
Well, because we didn't
choose the meeting place.
Yeah, we didn't choose the meeting place. I was 18, so you must have been 18 as well, I guess. Yeah, that's right. And I didn't know anything about anything.
We were barefaced and bare-chested and
naive. Completely naive and very hopeful as well. And we were doing a sort of a volunteer English teaching kind of program in Thailand. And also we hung out a lot, and we had some guitars, and we played a lot of music and wrote some fun and some silly songs and some fun ones. And it was good.
We taught English during the day, and then at night we would be up in these we lived in the schools, and we'd be up in these buildings in the schools, drinking rum and playing guitar.
Yeah, basically.
And there was no internet, and we didn't have phones, and so it was very free time in our lives, and we were learning how to ride motorbikes and playing soccer with the local kids and stuff.
It was a very free time. It was actually probably the freest time of my life, I reckon. There you go.
And at that time, you met in a McDonald's, so then afterwards, obviously, you start to bond. But was music the thing that you bonded over, or was it?
So we kind of ended up living together for 3 months. Okay. So because we did this program together. So and at one point we were staying in one room with both of us and another 3 people in one little tiny wooden room. So it was very intimate. And but I would say we kind of just music was great because it was really nice to play together. And I guess we had this kind of, because we kind of have, our skill sets go well together. Like I'm a singer and Oscar's a really amazing guitarist, and so together it's pretty effortless.
Yeah, I mean, and we could have never guessed back then that we'd be playing in a band someday, but
because it was about 10 years later that we actually started playing in a band.
Yeah,
we just were mates then, and then we just kept in touch. But then it was more than 10 years later. It was 12.
Yeah, it was some.
Maybe it was about 10.
Yeah,
about 10 years later, we started writing together. And
because am I right in saying you don't live close to each other?
No.
So what reignited that bond? So
well, then it was Europe.
It was chance, really.
Okay.
It wasn't like we were like, hey, let's get together. I was living in Stockholm. Oscar was living in Berlin, and he had a meeting in Stockholm, and he was like, can I sleep on your couch? And I was like, yes. And then while he was there, I made him help me record a demo, and it was great. And so we just embarked on this writing project.
And I was in Berlin with some bands, and they were kind of falling apart. So I was more than happy to enjoy making some music and have another fresh and exciting outlet.
And we were old mates, and we always liked hanging out anyway, so...
Yeah, and it's so exciting. I mean, it was great for me. I loved going to Stockholm, and I think Tim enjoyed coming to Berlin, and we just did this thing, and it's so easy to go from place to place in Europe. And so, we kind of just did this to and fro.
And you mentioned that you kind of complement each other as musicians. Was this evident at the very first time, that first trip?
Yeah. I mean, it was evident when we first started hanging out. I always loved playing with Oz. It just sort of always felt really natural and easy. And then, like, we kind of had separate, like, sort of music careers. So Oscar was in some quite successful bands in Melbourne, and I was kind of doing this sort of singer-songwriter thing in Brisbane. But when I was making my debut album, I invited Oscar up, and he actually guested and played on 3 tracks on that debut album in 2007.
Is that then? Yeah, must have been.
And then we kind of didn't see each other that much again, and then came back together. But I don't know. I guess it was because the other skill set that Oscar has is production, because he's a producer as well as guitarist, and so that was another skill set that I was missing. So it did work out well.
Yeah, and I think that collaborations always tend to work best when you have sort of separate and interlocking skill sets. So I'm always obviously collaborating with people who sing and write lyrics, and that's exciting and fun for me. And I guess I need people too who can sing in my life, because it never came naturally to me. So yeah, I mean, it's always been just easy, you know, with Tim. So
do you remember the first song that you wrote together that you felt proud of?
Felt proud of. That's
felt
good. So
proud of.
We'll
We'll skip all the first like.
It's got to be something off. I was. If I were you.
Yeah, I was. I mean, I've been proud of quite a few of them, really.
We did this project. Well, we were both living in Europe for a year, and over that year we recorded this suite of songs called the Swedish Tapes.
Right.
And they were kind of like these demos that we did in, like, just in Oscar's like apartment. Like, you know, we were using like drum samples, and Oscar was playing, like, you know, we even were using like iPhone synths and just whatever we could kind of manage. And so they were kind of scrappy, but, you know, they had some kind of heart to them, and that they ended up being the bare bones of what then sort of went. Then we went into the studio and recorded to 2-inch tape and had like real drums and like did this big produced record, which took us like 2 years, because we were just doing it whenever we had time. We'd just get in the studio and we re-recorded stuff heaps. Like it was a way less of a time pressure, because we didn't have a label or a manager or anything, so it was just like we just did it whenever we wanted to.
At this point then, what was the ambition, if there was any?
Well, initially, we got back from Europe. I mean, we were travelling separately, but we got back to Australia at a similar time, I think, anyway. And I live in Melbourne. Tim was living in Brisbane then, along with our producer and the rest of the band, and the band didn't really exist as a defined group at that point. And I think initially it was Tim pulling people together to create this record that he wanted to make. And out of that process, this band called Holy Holy, it became established, and it got to a point, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, where I think, Tim, you decided that it was a band and it wasn't you anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And so it became Holy Holy, which is a name that, again, Tim had, and it just, and then we released a song called Impossible Like You. I feel like when we released that song and it went well, you know, that was when we were like, oh shit, okay, cool.
Right.
But,
really, you know, that was, for me, that was a moment where I was like, fuck.
But in terms of the ambition, like, I had just always played music. Since I was about like 19, I was like doing like open mic nights, and then, you know, a lot of my friends played, and there was like this really like ratty, like total dive bar down the road from us, and the venue gave us a night, like me and my crew. We had like Wednesday nights, and we would like program bands, and it was just kind of what we did. Like, you know, like some people play sport and some people go night clubbing and stuff. Like, I never went night clubbing. It was always just gigs and rehearsals, and so, you know, it was kind of natural when we got back to Australia that I wanted to like continue performing and continue like doing shows, and used to do a lot of residencies and stuff, like take over a bar for a month and get everyone that anyone who was doing anything interesting to come down, and we would often be like the house band, and we would like open the night and then have a guest afterwards. So it was kind of just that, and you know, just the project of making a record. It's like a bit like writing a novel, you know. It's just like we were just chipping away at it. But then when the record was done, then it was kind of a bit of a turning point, and we kind of decided we wanted to get a manager, and it became a bit more formal, and that was nice too, because the gigs became bigger, and